Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to do part 2 of the Rule of Life series. Again, my name is Meryl. Last video we talked about how, the Rule of Life will benefit you, what it is. Just kind of a quick little summary. A Rule of Life is just kind of a set of practices and rhythms that help support your growth in Christ and just help you flourish in the ways that you're called. So we looked at, rule being like a trellis. We'll use the metaphor of like a garden, and just growth, because it's such a powerful image, and because it takes time. A rule of life, something essential about it is that it will take time. In this video, I really want to unpack, how do we get started? How do we start to think about creating a rule of life? And how do we take it in stride too? Because there are going to be 3 areas that we focus on. God, we're going to focus on self, and then we're going to focus on others. And within those 3 categories, there's going to be a couple subcategories, and that can feel like a lot. There is a PDF workbook that kind of comes with this, so feel free to follow along. I think we're on page 2 or 3, don't quote me, but you'll find it. We're just going to go through, just in this video, what does it mean to start thinking about creating a rule of life? The first thing I just want to say about rule of life is to take your time with it, and to maybe even choose to focus on some of the areas that resonate the most with you. Just right off the bat, I want to say even just you starting this video is a great first step. It's saying, I'm curious about what's going on in my life and how I want to become closer to God. The thing about rule of life is that we already have one. By the time we start thinking about it, our habits are formed. Most of us maybe have jobs, we have families, we have relationships, and so we're really going to start with looking at, what is my current rule of life? Whether we know it consciously or unconsciously, there are values in which that are driving the things that we do. And they're forming us to be a certain person, right? Maybe if we work a lot, we're a person that is very ambitious. It tells us, what we do tells us about who we are. And having a rule of life helps us regulate, right, or moderate, who do I actually want to be? It gives us space to actually look at, what are our intentions? What are we doing here? So the first thing we want to start with is thinking about, maybe throughout this whole entire week, how do I spend my time? Something to think about is, when you first wake up in the morning, where is the first place your mind goes? Is it to spend time with God? Is it to check your emails? Is it to, check the news? Is it to quick and get a cup of coffee? None of those things are good or bad. We just have to ask ourselves a little later, like, well, what is this doing to me? Where is this leading me? And how do I want to start my day? Part of understanding what our current rule of life is and what we value is just kind of like putting together a puzzle, right? There's so many experiences that we have throughout the day. There's so much of our history, our temperament, our interactions that shape and form us. And so having a rule of life is kind of like an edge of a puzzle, right? It helps us like kind of guide us and gives us our parameters of like, okay, what is my life like? And then as we go through this process, we're going to kind of turn over every puzzle piece and go, okay, well, how do I feel about my relationships? Which ones do I want to invest more time in? Which ones maybe are draining to me? And what does that mean for me and God? And so as we think about a rule of life, we're going to think about kind of these 2 questions of, what gives me life and what drains me? What am I invited into? And what am I doing because of some other narrative? Because oftentimes we have things inside of us like shoulds, oughts, ought tos, have tos. That's a big one for me, is I feel like I have to. And if we want God, I assume if we all want God to be the center of our life, to be the one who is where we come to, we depend on, who is guiding our steps, who are participating with His work in the world. If we're listening to that Pharaoh voice, we all have it, I do, of someone that tells me, you should do this. Well, God's already brought us out of Egypt. We're not supposed to go back to that. And so getting to look at, what are the things that I feel like are demanded from me? Or what are the things that I'm called to do? It's a whole different approach. It's a different approach to approach our life with. What am I actually being called to and being invited into? There's a sense of grace and a sense of peace with that, and a sense of balance and stewardship, as opposed to fear or obligation or authoritarian. And God doesn't want us to live in fear with him. I mean, fear does lead us to wisdom, but part of having a rule of life and unpacking that is looking at with some wisdom, okay, what do I do with my life? Mary Oliver has this really beautiful poem called The Summer Day. And in it, she says, tell me, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So that question confronts us with, what are we actually doing right now? And gives us the opportunity and the hope to actually engage with that question. And, what do we want to do? What does God want us to do? And how does this align with who I am? If you're really introverted and you spend a lot of your time, maybe you're in sales and you're constantly having meetings, you're gonna know that at the end of the night, need to really, wind down and spend some time, reflecting or journaling. And maybe that's something you've always wanted to do, but because, you have kids and you have a spouse and you have, boards that you're a part of, in the community, you might need to look at, okay, well, how can I nurture my introversion? How can I nurture my quiet time so that I have space in my life to do the things that actually help sustain me? It's kind of thinking back to the trellis, like how can I put like a pole here and some wires so that I can grow, so that I can support me, so that I can actually expand, so that I'm doing my job in sales, or when I'm making decisions and guiding my team that I'm managing, I have patience with them, and I have wisdom, and I have discernment, and I'm coming from a place of calm. I don't need to demand from them because my life isn't being demanded. It helps us really cultivate, that type of inner peace. So I encourage you this week just to think about what your current rule of life is. How have you been following God? And maybe even let some ideas of how you might want to change, what might be different. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at, the different focuses, God, self, and others, and they're going to kind of flow into each other. So I encourage you to take it bite size, and I look forward to seeing you in week 3.